Good evening and thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to yet another exciting edition of Face the Nation. I am your host, Ian Vambe. This is the program where we bring responsible authorities, be it ministers, be it CEOs, be it the permanent secretaries of various ministries, for them to explain to us what exactly is happening in their ministries, in their line of work, so that you and me, we get to have a clear understanding and a clear appreciation of where the country is coming from, where are we going, how much are we doing in terms of implementation of the policies. And tonight, the man facing the nation is none other than Professor Obert Jiri, who is the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Lands, Agriculture, Fisheries, Water and Rural Development. He's going to help us unpack issues around his Ministry of Agriculture, what has been done in as far as hunger is concerned, wheat production, and he is here to unpack that. Prof. Jiri, good evening and thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening, Ian, and good evening, viewers.
We do have a lot of issues to talk about this evening. Let's start on wheat production. We understand that so far, around 91,000 hectares have been planted. What is the target and where are we in terms of that?
The target is 120,000 hectares, which is basically defined by our irrigation capacity. If it were not for that, we would be doing much more.
Right.
But yes, 91,000 was more than a week ago. As we stated today, we are on 113,152 hectares. So the farmers are racing against time to ensure that by Friday they finish planting. So we are 94% of our target, and so far so good. We should be able to hit our target come the 14th of June, which by which the farmers must stop planting.
You say the target is defined by our irrigation capacity. What can be done maybe to increase the irrigation capacity so that our target can also be increased? Ultimately, we have a better output.
So in our country, we do have a lot of water resources. We are the most dammed country in Southern Africa. Outside South Africa, we have more than 10,600 water bodies, which are able to irrigate close to 2 million hectares. Out of that potential that we have, we can only irrigate, we are only irrigating about 217,000 hectares currently, which is a paltry 10% of what we can irrigate. However, out of that 217,000 hectares that are irrigable, that are under irrigation, the majority of that 46,000 hectares is under sugarcane, for example, and other pockets are under plantation crops. We are left with, for this winter season, we were left with about 143,000 hectares, which we could irrigate. However, we also have other competing crops which are planted to that hectarage. It left then us with just around 120,000 hectares which we could irrigate. So the limit is really the amount of irrigable land that we can put to cereals or put to wheat at any particular moment. So that is why we say the production is limited by the irrigable land that we have.
So you say 120,000 is the target. What does it mean if we are able to have this target reached? What does it mean in terms of the national output? Are we going to have food sufficient? Are we going to export more? What does it translate to?
So if you look at 2 years ago, we started to break the records of wheat production. So ever since this country started to produce wheat, we were able to surpass the national requirement. Our national requirement for wheat grain is 360,000. So in 2022, we were able to surpass that. We produced 375,000 metric tons of wheat, which was more than enough for us to be wheat self-sufficient. In 2023, last year, we produced 465,000 metric tons of wheat, which obviously is more than sufficient. In fact, as of last year, we were one of the only 2 countries which became wheat self-sufficient in Africa, ourselves and Ethiopia. So when we produced more than we produced, more than we need, we certainly become sufficient, and we're able to have that excess for what we can do. What we realized this year when the drought was, the El Nino induced drought was proclaimed, and the country is in the state that it is in, the state of disaster, the wheat became a food of choice. We then came with, the president announced a wheat-based food security strategy, which essentially meant that we can consume the wheat grain that we produced in excess in various forms straight, or we can exchange that for maize grain. But more importantly, we then said we have the competitive and the comparative advantage to recover from the drought by putting all we can into wheat production, because we can produce wheat. In Southern Africa, we are one of the only two countries, ourselves and South Africa, who are able to produce wheat on account of our developed irrigation, obviously, and also the competitive advantage because of our climate. So we then said, let's put our all into winter wheat production to ensure that we produce and recover from the drought that affected the summer crop. So when we did the 120,000 hectare target, we anticipated that we were going to produce around 600,000 metric tons. And if you look at the maths, it means that with 5 tons per hectare, which is what we can produce, 5 tons per hectare for wheat, as compared to other crops, we have a competitive advantage to produce wheat in winter. If we do that, we are able to then, in 4 months to October, to deliver to the country 600,000 metric tons of grain. And this is why we were really focusing on putting our all into winter wheat production.
Prof, you explained in your response that His Excellency spoke about wheat-based food security. Now, let's talk about that. Are we saying, we know Zimbabweans, sadza is the staple food, maize becomes what we're always looking for. When you say wheat-based food security, are people going to have sadza the wheat? Wheat?
So you find that a hungry man is not a chooser. I remember long back when there was a drought, there was yellow maize,
right,
which came, we called it a certain name. Back then I was a young man, and it had this pungent smell, and we didn't like it.
When
there was no option. So when push comes to shove and wheat is there, we certainly will eat it. But there are all options that we can certainly use. One of which we are using currently is to swap that wheat for maize grain. For millers who need wheat, for example, and they have maize, they can always exchange, and we proceed then to give maize to the people. But if push comes to shove, there is no reason why all the youngsters who constitute 65% of our population, they prefer anything that's not sadza. So yes, we are sadza eaters naturally, it's our staple, but you have all these other options and alternatives which may be preferred by the young people and other people who prefer wheat, for example, or wheat-based diets. So it's not, when we have it, when we have grain, we can always have all options that we can use to make sure that we convert that to food that we eat.
So what this conversation does then, Prof, it shows how important the wheat farmer is now. Any incentives for the wheat farmers who are producing more?
So certainly you find that there was a debate, and there was obviously concern when the wheat farmers were paid late. And the first incentive is really to pay the wheat farmers on time, and that is a critical thing. And we are working.
Is that going to happen?
Yes. So we are working all we can. So far, we have finished paying all the wheat farmers for the 2023 crop. Going forward, we have said that let's have a crop purchase buffer fund, which essentially means that we want to ensure that our farmers are paid on time. And this is the fund that we are now working to ensure that come the time for deliveries for wheat, our wheat farmers are cushioned, and that fund will be able to pay for the wheat that's produced. But there are also other incentives. We are also ensuring that the wheat farmers get inputs on time, access inputs on time. We are also ensuring that as a facilitator role as government, we ring fence these farmers for power. We ring fence these powers for water. So all those incentives certainly are there. But we are not stopping there. We are all looking at price incentives, which will ensure that the wheat farmers will smile all the way to the bank.
Interesting when you promise that it's going to happen that way. But let's briefly talk about food security. We know that we have got the El Nino-induced droughts. So currently, are we as a country food secure?
So certainly we are not on account of the El Nino-induced drought, which is why His Excellency the President announced that we are in a state of disaster on account of the El Nino-induced drought. So we did not produce enough. In fact, we only produced a third of what we need if we were consuming at 1.8 million metric tons that we ordinarily consume. So we produced 744,000 metric tons of grain, which is far much less than we require as a country. So food secure, we are not. But certainly we have a plan which ensures that no one goes hungry, as the President said, and we have interrogated the plan to make it sound light. We'll say that we have what we have currently in the stocks at GMB and the other players. We have what we harvested, which is poultry, so that is able to push people for a few months, depending on where they are. And then we also have millers who have been allowed to import. So the millers are importing for stock feeds, certainly, so we don't compete with human beings. And then they are also importing for human beings. And then third, we obviously have other grain that we have, the wheat that we have talked about, which we produced in excess last season. And then the wheat-based strategy, which ensures that come October, we deliver more than 500,000, 600,000 metric tons of grain. So all those are really programmatic approaches to ensure that we have a plan for ensuring no one goes hungry in this El Nino-induced drought season.
So this plan, you feel, is going to ensure that no one dies of hunger, and you say that with explaining what this sector is going to do, what you have got planned for this. Is this the best plan we can ever come up with in terms of ensuring that no one dies of hunger?
Certainly, we know that this is the best plan, and obviously added to that is the appeals that we have. So following the announcement of the drought and of the disaster, the appeal which appeals then to the international community to assist.
What has been the response so far? Appeals has been made. Have we received anything in terms of the international community coming on board, promising or actually giving us something?
So yes, we have the development partners coming through, and obviously they were waiting for this. That's what they are meant for. So we have had responses from our development partners, the UN community. We have already come through to assist in logistics, and so far they also, once we had our appeal, they also go to their donors and funders to ensure that they get the resources. So when we did the initial appeal, yes, those things will come through. So we are on course to ensure that when those resources come through, we are our people will be assisted. But also we do have the other plans where even the development partners, when they come through, they have to come through when there is already a pathway to go through. So together with other ministries in a whole of government approach, that plan is really essential. As government also, we have started to import as a stopgap measure to import 300,000 metric tons, which will come through into the port of government. Remember, I said there is also the private sector which is importing for stock feeds and also for humans, but government has also put in a pot of 300,000 metric tons to ensure that that also goes to the strategic grain reserve. So the plan is very clear and solid.
Confident of the plan, I can tell, and you are very sure it's going to work. Prof, we are going to take a short break. When we come back, we interrogate more on the government's plan to make sure that you and me, we don't die of hunger, and obviously what needs to be done for us to get to that position. Don't go anywhere. We are going to take a short break. Stay with us. Thank you so much for staying with us. The program is Face the Nation, and we do have Prof. Obert Jiri from the Ministry of Lands, Agriculture, Fisheries, Water and Rural Development. He is the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry and is explaining government's plan to ensure that we will not die of hunger as a country. Now, before we went for the break, you were breaking down the plan, sounding very confident that it's going to work. Let's briefly talk about people in urban areas as well as students in tertiary institutions. Are they going to be part and parcel of the food schemes that you spoke about earlier on?
So yes, every vulnerable human being, person in Zimbabwe is part of the plan. We know that in the rural areas there is 6.1 million people who are vulnerable, according to the assessment that we did together with social welfare.
But Prof, before you go further, when you talk of droughts like this, vulnerability, are we not all vulnerable in terms of such the magnitude of this particular drought?
So it is the capacity that you have to purchase, which defines your vulnerability. Obviously, when we tell you that they are the old people with no one to support, they are the disabled, they are the child-headed families, they are the terminally ill, I don't think you fall in that category.
Right.
So those become vulnerable, better than, more vulnerable than yourself. And obviously you have those people that depend on rain-fed irrigation who did not harvest anything. So those are the vulnerable people. In the towns, you also have those people that, depend on those small fields that don't have the good jobs, that hustle. So those were also assessed. And in towns, we have 1.7 million vulnerable people that need assistance. So in the towns, obviously, these are not given food handouts. They are given cash payouts to enable them to buy food, because we know that in the cities they have access to roller meal, to all these milled products. So they need cash payouts. That's what they get to be able to buy. The students, they have to fall into that vulnerable category. They have to be assessed. If they fall within the 1.7 million, they become part of the cash out. But ordinarily, most of the students will be catered for in other programs.
How much are we talking about when we talk about these cash transfers?
The Ministry of Social Welfare would know that. We know that they do get enough to be able to purchase a 10 kg pocket of food. Remember, for the vulnerable, they get 7.5 kgs per person per month. So that is what it's calculated upon. The actual figure will certainly be known by the Minister of Public Service and Social Welfare.
Is it made public, or it will differ from area to area, family to family?
I'm sure it will be made public.
Okay, interesting. Let's move on to talk about the upcoming conference, the irrigation conference. Maybe you can shed some more light. What are we expecting from this particular one?
So as I explained before, we do have a huge irrigation potential on account of the water that we have and of the water bodies that we have. We do have, untapped water resources in terms of what we can use for irrigation, for example. You talk of your Tokwe Mkosi, you talk of your Osborne Dam, you talk of your, Mchekeranwa Dam, and many other big dams that we have in the country.
The Bobilu panels.
Yes, with huge irrigation potential. But currently, we are irrigating a paltry 217,000 hectares. We need to think as a country to say, so should we continue to go hungry when we have such water resources which can literally enable us to be food self-sufficient, in fact to be net exporters of grain if we want? What we need as a country to be able to feed ourselves, if we are eating 20 kgs per person per month, we should be able to get, we need 1.8 million metric tons that we can produce under irrigation on 350,000 hectares. Remember, I said that what we have irrigation potential for cereals is about 120, 143, maybe less if we put alternatives there when people start to look at various options. If we say we have 100,000 hectares available for cereal production, it means that we have a gap of 250,000 hectares that we need to put under cereals every season to be able to produce enough for ourselves and maybe enough for export as well. So that is the gap that we need to close. And this is why we are calling upon everyone to say, let's put our heads together and unlock this 250,000 hectare gap that we have so that we can produce enough. Come climate change, come El Nino, we will have enough because we'll be producing it under irrigation. The only thing that we will need to do then is to focus on productivity, how much we produce per hectare. So the moment we increase from 5 tons per hectare under irrigation to anything, all that is excess food that we will produce and we will be able to feed ourselves and even export.
So do you feel the conference is the solution? Who are we expecting to come? Who do you expect is going to maybe to help us unpick this particular potential you speak about for us to really go all out on irrigation? Who exactly is coming for this particular conference that we believe could possibly bring solutions and alternatives?
So we certainly need investors who will come on board. But the first thing that anyone would need to do is to understand this concept that we have, that we need 350,000 hectares under cereal production to be able to be self-sufficient as a country. So that is the understanding that we would want anyone involved in the irrigation space, in the production space, in the agricultural space, in the funding space, to understand that there is an opportunity. For bankers, for example, when we invite them, we want them to understand that if they invest in irrigation, they will be able to reduce the risk profile of their loan book by a huge margin, because now they know that they will fund something that they are guaranteed of getting a return. If we invite the irrigation people, we know that they will be able to unlock their business in a big way, because now they will know that the country is focused on promoting equipment to deal with irrigation. If we invite development partners, we know that they would be excited because suddenly we will reduce the dependency on humanitarian support to development support. So everyone must come for this conference, which we think will unlock the vast potential that is there in Zimbabwe as a country. So our agriculture is and must be hinged on climate proofing through irrigation development, and this is why this conference is so important.
We will speak to you after the conference to find out if what you are saying is the trajectory that the conference actually took. But let's move on to talk about land distribution in the country. You talk of agriculture being very key, and His Excellency is also on record talking of agriculture being a key factor in terms of achieving Vision 2030. There are young people who are interested in farming, who would love to have some piece of land. What is the government's policy regarding that? And maybe what is the process right now if one needs a piece of land? What do they have to do?
So let me start by saying that 99% of the land has already been distributed or redistributed.
But is it functional?
So that's another matter. So for us to continue giving land, it comes from two sources. One is redistributing land on the beneficiaries that have already benefited. So downsizing and so forth, and looking at the land that is not productive, like you have said, derelict land and so forth. So that's one source. The second source is to unlock communal land into irrigable land. So those are the two sources that we can have to unlock the value of the land.
Right.
For we have more than 270,000 people on the waiting list, including young people. We have more than 10,000 people in the diaspora who want land. So the demand for land in Zimbabwe is huge, because everyone now is seeing the value of owning a piece of land and producing on your own. But the land doesn't expand. So we feel for the young people. But however, we know that the young are our future. The young people are really our future. So we have various programs that we have to ensure that they have access to land. Obviously, the first point of call is for them to apply through their provinces, their districts. They do the normal application. But they should not wait for that, because the waiting list is there. Those that are getting, they are getting as per the waiting list. But there are also other programs which we can use to ensure that they get into production and they utilize the land. So the joint venture programs that we are rolling out is very key for young people to come into that space. We have some of the biggest producers of wheat, of maize in this country. They are young people who have gone into joint ventures with farmers who need
Unfortunately, our
capacity.
time is nearly up, Prof. But are you saying joint ventures should be the way to go?
Yes, they are one of the ways. Certainly, they are one of the ways which we have seen production jumping in farms to ensure production and productivity on farms.
Prof. Jiri, thank you so much for coming through to Face the Nation, and we would really love to appreciate what you shared. We will bring you back to find out more in terms of what you said. Is it being achieved? Is it being done? And are the young people getting the land, like you said? Thank you so much for coming through, Prof.
Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for the other invitation next time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That is Professor Obert Jiri from the Ministry of Lands, Agriculture, Fisheries, Water and Rural Development, explaining to us what is being done by the ministry in as far as issues around land, agriculture, wheat, which is now topical, concerned, and he really explained all that. That's what we had for you on tonight's edition of Face the Nation. Until we meet again next time, my name is Ian Wambe, and stay tuned to ZBC TV.